the subtitle of this was, I think, a case study of Britain's exit from the EU. So I thought that event illustrates some of the concerns about education and democracy, I think. And I just put a few delights and delusions of democracy in here, just to remind us of how complicated this democracy thing is. My dad voted twice, you know, because in the 30s, if you were a university student, you had one vote as a university student in a proper election, you know, national election, and one in your home or whatever your constituency was. And if you could vote sometimes up to 10 times, depending where you had houses. You know, so that, Britain being a mother of democracy, had all kinds of strange things going on. Look at our present Prime Minister, elected by just over 100,000 people. You know, that's the mother of democracy, and look what he's up to. And probably in the room you have some other examples that will occur to you of where our friend Mark is from South Africa, and one of the well-known prime ministers of South Africa was Jan Smuts. He did about 15 years as prime minister, who put him into office. You know, how many people voted for him, and what were their colours? Given this is the University of Education, I hope something of what I'll say will be relevant to what is actually taught in schools. Is the threat to democracy that I'm going to be talking about via social media, is that even any evidence of that in our civics? These things are called different names in different countries, but the civics curriculum, to what extent is it aware of what is going on in social media? And how does democracy get reflected in the UN Declaration of Human Rights? Pretty amazing document, wasn't it? That in 1948, when half the world was still under colonial rule, that they should say that. I mean, that's before 1949 here, you know, and while most of Africa was, of course, under 3 or 4 different countries colonially. Many people don't know about what the vote was about. They know about Brexit, but that's what people were asked. Very simple question, yes? Choose one of these. No, there was no discussion about the things that have gone on for the last 3 years. No mention of the Irish border, the backstop visas, health insurance. The sterling fell by 19 to 20% the day after. You know, none of that was under discussion. There's even many of the newspapers like The Guardian and the BBC have glossaries, so you explain what is, the terminology is so complicated that actually, if we did have to run another vote on, you know, what is called a people's vote, a second referendum, there's a lot of explaining to do about the meaning of what this is, the Brexit that we voted for, and which is called the will of the people. I mean, here, do people in this room, do we know what the 4 freedoms of the EU are? The 4 freedoms of members of the EU? I would bet that most people in Britain wouldn't be able to get through those 4. We've only been members of the EU for, well, just 40 years plus, you know, not very much. But I bet most people don't know what the 4 freedoms are. In the room, who knows? Mark?
I think that
Ravina? Freedom of
people, movement of people,
yeah.
Goods, services, and capital.
There we are, you're right. Goods, capital, services, and labour. And you know, if you're ever thinking of organising a referendum, any of you in the room, you should make sure that, as in the first, I think in the first referendum, or the one on Scottish independence, there had to be you had to reach a certain percentage for it to be And that's the same in Switzerland. You can't have a referendum that wins by 50.05%. That then ends you in the kind of chaos that we're in Britain, because it's too close. It isn't evident. We chose to stay by 62% back in the 70s. In case you want to see the numbers, those are the numbers, and that's why it's so terribly complicated in Britain. Those are the numbers between the people who voted to leave, 17 million, and those who voted to stay. And you may notice, if you look down at the 51 million, that the number of people who voted to leave is actually about the same number as those who didn't get around to voting at all. So, you know, the will of the people, which is much used by the Conservative Party, is I think, evident in that slide there. So you can see that what we're going to talk about is what if social media is impacting on your ideas of whether you should vote to stay or to remain. You only need about 1 million people to be influenced. It's a very small number. It's not like if you've got to reach 60% or 65% for it to be taken into law. So it's a very small number. So when you look at what we're going to talk about, which is the targeting of social media, here are the connections that I want to look at. Including particularly the sources of misinformation and disinformation, and the messages about immigration nationalism. And this use of, this is the term that we'll come back to, the micro-targeting of people in constituencies of similar approaches. Those approaches being created by the mechanisms that people use for social media, and what it means for something that some people in the room will be interested in. What is critical literacy, digital literacy, going to mean in this kind of situations where you can create algorithms of people? People in the room here, I never get sent a message about leaving the EU. The people who are messaging me, I never get a message about leaving the EU, because the organizations that are contacting me and sending me messages every day, I'm getting messages about remain, okay? Because I've been constructed. They know who I am. I don't know if Rena gets the same, but I get messages, including from you get messages from former deputy prime ministers like Michael Heseltine. Dear Kenneth, how many hundreds of thousands of people are getting Dear Kenneth? So, you know, I've been constructed as, I'm part of an algorithm. That's one of the messages that we've got to be aware of, and the same is true in this country. Everywhere. So we'll see how it connects, if we have time, to the SDGs. Now, there is some data on this, and I think the data on to what extent education has been a factor in voting, both in the UK election and in the US election, it has been covered quite carefully by, but some of the background, you can even see some of it in the Global Monitoring Report of 2012. There is a literature on, does education make a difference? And if you're interested in that, you could follow that literature. But in the middle paragraph there is some very strong evidence that the people who voted in the EU referendum, 78% of them with degrees voted to remain. And you can see the similarly high number of those who voted leave. 72% of those with no qualifications voted leave. And you can get similar figures if you look at the US, voting for Clinton versus voting for Trump. You're in a similar pattern. So how important is education? What is it about going to college that makes that kind of difference. And that's one of the issues that we need to think about. The key document and the key person, what's the name of Curtis in Strathclyde, he is one of the key experts on voting patterns in the UK, and he also writes and is editor of the British Social Attitude Survey. That key one is number 34, where you can see the... there's also an age factor, as you can see. Kids voted to remain. The trouble was, especially university kids, by the time June 23rd came along in 2016, they'd gone on their holidays. And many of them thought, oh, this would be a walkover for Remain. They didn't bother to vote, many young people. So, as we saw on that slide. So, questions to come back to about what is it about higher education that might encourage these attitudes towards electioneering? What is critical thinking, and how does it help you to deal with fake news and disinformation? Now, I think it's become clear that social media played a massive role in it's a pity that the two key political parties in the UK haven't taken this up. They're afraid to do so, because if you start analysing this question about the impact of social media on patterns, and including the funding of social media, which is outside the usual electioneering minimums, so you can put funds into social media electioneering, which does not come into your minimum allowed for. Yeah. Does come into your election expenditures. So it's been intensively investigated. As you know, the Mueller inquiry has been looking at this. Even they've run into it. But we had done nothing like the Mueller inquiry in the UK. The best thing you can look at, though, is the DCMS, the Digital Culture, Media and Sport, did a brilliant analysis. It's actually called Fake News. The subject is at the end, the reference from it. And there's clear evidence of the use of Facebook data. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people's algorithms being used to target messages about your voting patterns with what are called dark ads. These are, it took the Guardian newspaper, which is one of the only newspapers in the UK which is involved with Remain. The rest are all pro-Leave. And that's pretty awful, isn't it? Most of the media, most of the newspapers in the UK. But they managed to get some of these dark ads. I'm going to show you a few of them. You've probably seen them elsewhere. And you will be aware that the targeting by Cambridge Analytica, good name, isn't it, for if you're starting a company? You know, Cambridge, that's okay, isn't it? Can't beat. I mean, Cambridge University, I was there. Cambridge Analytica, they will help you win an election. They haven't been only concerned with the UK and USA, they've been in Kenya, they've been in India, they've been in Latin America, and it took the Guardian newspaper to track them down. So it's entirely possible that that minute difference between the two votes has been affected by the role of. I mean, I think it would be very hard not to make that point. According to this is a parliamentary report, cross-parliament, cross-party. So it's not the Labour Party making some propaganda or the Liberal Democrats. It's a cross-party report, and it's arguing that this targeting, relentless targeting of hyper-partisan views, and you play on the prejudices of people. It's interesting, this person, the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, he has of course stepped down as soon as this all came to public eye. He's explaining what he does as trying to make sure, it's quite a nice quote, that voters receive messages on the issues and policies that they care most about. That's exactly it. You can target people with what they care most about. Prejudices about workers, prejudices about migration, patriotic messages, prejudices against Jeremy Corbyn, or in favour of anti-Jewish stuff. That can only be good. That can only be good for politics. So, what the DCMS concluded by their analysis, which was draft last year, final draft early this year, is that we really need that paragraph. Just have a look at what they say here. That has to include, if you're talking about civics, you have to include that what you see on Amazon, Netflix, or Facebook has been decided by an algorithm. How an algorithm gets developed, how it's created, by a certain, how their basis might shape that. That has to become part of the curriculum. The construction of what your interests are, followed by, you know, what to think, where to go, where to protest, how to vote. Here are some of the. That's one of the ones that was put out multiple times to constituencies of people who we knew were concerned about migration, who might not have liked the fact that many tens of hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans were working in the UK. This is, it's not very clear, but it says 76 million Turks are being, this is not true, of course. This is not true, are being offered visa-free access. And you see, it's not into Europe, it's into Britain. 76 million. Now you see, you're getting this multiple times in the days before the referendum. You're getting this. So what does it say to you about vote leave? Let's get out of this club where these millions of Turks are going to be taking our job.
Can I just say one thing? I think it's also how our eyes sort of skip over Europe now, absolutely into Britain. Whereas if we're talking about the EU, it would have been all over the country. But we don't, you know, we are sort of lulled into just looking at this and thinking, oh, truth. So I think it's to really look at these ads and to see what they're actually saying, you know, rather than to just receive them.
There are actually no plans for the Turkey because of where it's going in terms of illiberalism, Mark. You know, there's no plans for Turkey.
And even then,
Turkey's been bribed by the EU, actually, to hold on to several million Syrians. EU money is keeping Syrians in Turkey so that they don't come into the EU. So you could have a quite different ad about how Turkey is playing an amazing role. Only countries in the south have any refugees. Apart from Angela Merkel's 1 million, we're talking millions of, the great majority of all refugees are in the south. They're in Kenya, they're in Uganda, they're in Ethiopia. You know, 1 million here, 1 million there, 2 million there. In Lebanon, in Jordan, but they're not in the UK. So this kind of ad is extraordinary. And you take it like a Facebook thing. Agree? Good news? This is one of the favourites, you know. They took space on the red buses in Britain, and this was across the buses. 350 million going to EU. We could build a hospital every 7 days. Well, as you know, if you've been in Britain, like our friend Vinci, we can't even mend a tap in 7 days. Let build a hospital. You know, Britain is one of the slowest places to build anything. Click to help the NHS, National Health Service. You know? There's the actual advert on the buses. That was all over London. So, you know, the cost of that might be noted as intellectual expenses because it's on a particular platform, but not the stuff that's coming into your smartphone. And this one, It took 2 years, by the way, for the Guardian newspaper to get these ads out of Facebook. A very sharp woman, Carol Cadwallader, managed to get these out. But you see, this is a very clever ad. It says the EU takes away from national parliaments the power to set economic policy and hands it over to an unelected set of bankers. Now, bankers also often in people's eyes mean Jews, you know? And you know, the Labour Party, Corbyn, has had a big problem with anti-Semitism. So it's a very clever ad, this one. This is a very old quote from Corbyn, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So the history of it's gone. So this takes us back to what I mentioned about 20 minutes ago, that there is a need for critical digital literacy in schools in order to make sense of what's going on with the kids who are in the classes with their smartphones. While you're teaching, they're probably doing something else. That's what was argued, that apart from reading, writing and arithmetic, there should be a fourth pillar, digital literacy. You should be aware of how you are being created. What image is there? What's going on that is sending you this message? People, you see, in China where there aren't many newspapers, because all the little newspaper shops are closed down, you're getting this stuff because of the algorithm that's coming to you as a professor in ECNU. You're getting the news that you want, as the CEO said. We're giving people the messages they want. So that's the last line of their February 17, 2019 report, very recent. Our democracy is at risk and now is the time to act to protect our shared values. The government has decided that digital literacy should not be a fourth pillar of the curriculum, the Conservative government. So they've already taken a decision about that. So this is not just about Britain, it's not just about USA. Cambridge Analytica were all over the world helping people with their elections, you know. So it's, even from Korea, even in South Korea. So those of you who are concerned about some of the Sustainable Development Goals and the education goal number 4, which 4.7 includes global citizenship education, as you know. So what we've been talking about is not what you'd find out by trying to follow global citizenship education via the center in South Korea or in UNESCO. This is a much more political analysis of global citizenship education. So I think if you want to look at what's going on in 4.7, then what we've just been talking about in the last 20 minutes is relevant to that. Global citizenship education is a much more politicized concept, in my view, than the kind of SDG variety of it. I put this in because some of you may have noticed, did you notice that, I think we're in China, one of Trump's advisors on China, have you come across this, Navarro? Has anybody heard of Navarro? You have. Navarro is in the White House advising Trump on China. And he often refers to books by a chap called Ron Vara. Ron Vara has written 6 books, and Navarro frequently quotes from them. These are books with really good titles like Death from China, you know, and this kind of, you know, seriously measured. An Australian academic began to trace Ron Vara and discovered these books don't exist at all. Ron Vara doesn't exist. Ron Vara is created by Navarro. It's made up of his actual letters of his name. Navarro, Ron Vara. So this White House, I think he's still in the White House, put him into, you can just look for him if you get a picture of this guy. it'll come up. He hasn't been sacked by Trump yet, but he's very much in our hate China rhetoric coming out of the White House. And so he's a very good example of the actual creation of fake news by a fake author with 6 books. I mean, so it is a dangerous world. Forget about students and plagiarism. It's right. So that's a return to making the point about how this discussion about digital literacy should really inform SDG 4.7. That's the text of SDG 4.7 in the middle. You can see it's a very challenging thing. How do you promote that? It's one of the most important parts of SDG 4, in my view, that one about those values and rights. But it's incredibly difficult to create indicators for that. The UIS, as some of you will know, haven't managed to provide global indicators for those complicated topics in the middle paragraph there. So if you look more generally at the position of democracy in the whole discussion about the SDGs, the word democracy hardly appears. And when it does appear, only once, and not in the actual goals, it appears as something that should be part of the enabling environment for social development. So I'm just wondering here, in the research in school and university that goes on, how are we could see if there are any reactions to the questions about how are we dealing with this in our own teaching here or in our own research? Our ministries, including the Department of Education in Hong Kong, are they concerned with critical digital literacy? What's happening with the civics curriculum in this country or in the mainland? Or what's happening in Britain? Well, Britain, we'll see in the slide in a moment, Britain is not doing very much about this. And I think it's quite important to make the point that this is not just IT, learning about IT, learning about computers. It's learning about how you are being influenced by what you are doing. I mean, it's a very complicated, it's not like other subjects. I mean, maths and history or Latin or Greek are not created in the way that digital literacy is concerned, making you aware that you have been created. You can be targeted, you can be... So I thought I'd end with referring you to a piece that just been published by LSE, London School of Economics, by these two people. And I think it's worth looking at what they say here. That's what we should be considering. It's a complex topic. The UK government doesn't appear to believe so, but in our view, in the author's view, the national curriculum falls short of teaching primary and secondary school children about the digital environment which they're all part of. They've all got smartphones. They are very much part of what we have just been discussing. So teachers, I think, do need training about how to teach children the skills and knowledge they require, we also need research on teachers' levels of digital literacy. There's some further reading on these topics, and I've done a paper behind this. If you want this PowerPoint, we can send it to you, but there's also a paper which I sent to Stella, who is making a film of this thing. So if you want the actual paper published by the Asia Pacific Education Review, came out a few weeks ago, that will give you a lot more references than we've been able to mentioned here. But we've got 20 minutes or so, I think, to look at some of the issues that we've been bringing up. So I hope that is just a start.